everybody. Welcome to Takeoff with John Clark, presented by Rivers Casino, and we are in the Phillies dugout, and it is a bye week for the Phillies, something different this year. JT Realmuto joining us. JT, this is kind of a new way for you with the playoffs. You guys rolled in the last 2 years. How is this different, getting all these off days?
It's a lot different, for sure. We were actually talking in the batting cage today just how, normally we'd be out on the field taking BP right now, getting ready for the biggest game of the season. But instead, we're here having a light practice day, just kind of resting, recouping. It's definitely a lot different feel than doing this than when you're playing the wild card.
So for this particular group, and Rob Thompson said there's some bumps and bruises, do you think it helps this group?
I think so, yeah. I think anytime, 162 games is a long season, so anytime we can get a little rest, rejuvenate the bodies a little bit, hit the ice tub, just kind of refresh for the next series, I think that's a good thing.
Now, it's not worked out for some teams. It works for some teams. And now you guys are kind of the hunted, whereas you've been doing the chasing the last couple of years. Any different feeling, mentality that way when there's teams coming after you now?
I don't think we necessarily approach it any differently. I definitely think the other teams do. I think, it's a little easier to play when you're the underdog and you're going out there with nothing to lose. I think more of the pressure is probably on us this year just because we are one of the favorites. But for us, nothing changes. We go out there and play our game, and we focus on winning one game every day and play our brand of baseball.
So obviously there's a lot of Phillies fans who say, all right, I don't want to see the Mets, rather face the Brewers or vice versa. Could the Mets be like what you guys were 2 years ago, where they're just hot going into the playoffs? Any concerns about them?
I think anybody could be that team. It's all about getting hot at the right time, and you don't really know who's hot until the games matter, and it's the postseason. So, any team we play is going to be a great team. It doesn't matter who we match up with. We have to bring our best brand of baseball, and who's to say that we're not going to be the hot team going through the postseason? So, for me, the regular season's done. The new season starts for us this weekend, and that's when we show who's going to be the hot team.
And you being the catcher and catching for this great pitching staff, do you see these guys, especially last year, Zack Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, these guys raising their level heading into the postseason? I
think so. It's what they've done for us in the past. They've all brought their best games for us when it mattered the most, and those are the guys we rely on year in and year out. They've been there for us every single postseason run, and they pitched great for us. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do it again this year.
And please tell everybody what it's like to catch for Zack Wheeler this year.
It's fun. It's like a video game. I feel like I'm just pressing buttons and he's executing. And sometimes it feels that easy. He's been so good for us, so dominant, and just really so consistent all year long.
It's interesting because I was watching the documentary on Greg Maddux, and he would literally call every single pitch, and he would do like something, and the catcher would know, even something with his nose. But Zack says he completely trusts you to call every pitch. Is that really the way it is? You call the entire game with Zack?
The whole game. I think maybe he shook 5 times the whole season. He almost never shakes. He's focusing on executing out there, and he trusts me to do the homework, to watch the video, to know the hitters, and then he doesn't have to shake because I know his stuff so well now. I know what he likes to do. I know what he executes at a high level. So I feel like we're on the same page pretty much the whole time.
That's pretty cool. How long do you think it took for you to start to get him, say, okay, I am on the same page with this guy?
I think it takes every bit of a full season to feel like you really know a pitcher, and that's a full season of them being successful. Because when you're working with a pitcher and they're struggling, a lot of times as a catcher you take that onto yourself and think oh, what am I doing wrong? Am I not calling the right pitches? Am I not setting up correctly? But working with Wheels from the first season, he was great, right away. And so I got to know him very quickly and what he did well and what he executes well. And I feel like after the first year, it was just smooth coast from there.
And did you get a sense from the beginning of this season that he was taking it to another level? He had the new pitch. Could you just sense that he was at a next level?
Yeah, honestly, it was just the way he came into spring training. He was as prepared as I've ever seen him come into a spring training, and he was throwing great right from the get-go. He brought the split in, and right from the start, that was a successful pitch. So he's just constantly improving, constantly getting better. Just before his last start, he was mentioning to me about how he's working on his curveball grip and tweak things a little bit, try to get a little sharper. And it's he's a guy who, as much success as he's had, he's still trying to get better and still working daily to evolve.
Do you love the fact that he came out and said from the get-go, I want to be the Cy Young Award winner?
Of course. That's what you want out of your ace, and your guy that takes them out every 5th day, goes out there and dominates. He's got all the confidence in the world, and as does this team have in him.
It's interesting when you get to the playoffs, you see the player's eyes, sometimes you're like, wow, they are locked in. Do you see Zack even more locked in the postseason?
It's hard. Yeah, yes and no. It's hard to say more locked in because he's honestly so locked in every time he takes the mound. I mean, he is intense out there. Like, he wants to rip the batter's head off every time. And he's such a quiet, like, reserved guy. But once he steps on the mound, he's got a lot of dog in him. So I will say it's as much in the postseason, but it's hard to be more than he is in the regular season. He's just that locked in, and that's why you see how consistent he is when he goes out there every day.
It's funny about baseball because I don't think people can feel that sometimes, when they're watching on TV, but you're a football guy. Yeah. So, Zack, you're saying he has that football mentality inside, but we don't really see maybe with words or expression?
For sure. I mean, because for me, like, when something goes wrong, the first person I look at is the guy on the mound. Like, how's he reacting? And I can just see the fire in Zack. Anytime he doesn't make a good pitch or they get a blue pit or they hit a home run, like, he is steaming inside. But he doesn't show it. Like, you wouldn't know it if you're just looking from the crowd probably, but for me, from watching his antics for so long, like, I can see everything gets to him. When he's not doing his job and he's not doing the best he can, like, there's a fire in there.
It's pretty amazing. How about this week? Is it different for you? Is this kind of like a football thing where a team's on a bye and they could have a couple of different opponents? Are you looking at a lot of the hitters for your pitchers already, both teams, Mets and Brewers?
Yeah, luckily we've actually played both of them very recently, so we've already kind of done a lot of the scouting that we would do on them. Obviously we'll go more in depth when we know who we're playing, but I'll be watching every game they play. I watched the Mets-Braves games last night, just watching their hitters, watching the pitchers, try to do a little scouting just by watching, but we'll dive into the numbers a little more once we know who we're playing.
Please tell Philadelphia, this ballpark is going to be wild for Red October. What does Red October mean to you?
Oh, it's electricity. I mean, this place is, I couldn't imagine wanting to play anywhere else. After playing here my first October and just getting to feel the energy and feel the vibe that the crowd brings every single game, it's incredible. There really is no other stadium like it. And we've played in quite a few in the last couple postseasons, but Citizens Bank blows everywhere out of the water.
And Rob Thompson was, of course, told by opponents that it is 4 hours of hell. Do you ever get told by other players?
And that's what I was going to say, is that's not just coming from the guys on this team. I mean, the guys on the other team talk about it and talk about Citizens Bank and talk about the atmosphere that this stadium brings in the postseason. So that's not just coming from the Phillies, that's coming from the other teams too.
And I remember when you played for the Marlins, you could sometimes hear conversations in the other dugout, right?
Exactly. It's completely different now, yeah.
So can Zack sometimes, how can he hear the pitchcom and your voice and what you're calling and stuff?
No, that's a problem. In postseason games, I have to strategically know when to press the buttons, because if I wait too long and the crowd's going, they can't hear what I'm pressing. So, like, I have to be on my game to be like, all right, I got to call this pretty quickly or they're not going to be able to hear it. Once the crowd gets amped up, right before the pitch, if they don't have it, they're not going to hear it, so then we have to go to fingers. So the crowd gets so loud that I have to call the pitch a little earlier than I usually would.
You might have to be the quarterback and calm everybody down. Like
I haven't had to bring that move yet, but usually we're running out of time, so I don't have enough time to do that.
That's pretty cool. How are you feeling, by the way? Because you've played less games this year because of your injury, but because you've played less games, do you think in a way, does that help you going into the postseason?
I don't necessarily think it helps me because I usually feel once I get to the postseason, I mean, your adrenaline takes over, your body feels great. This year, with the injury I had, it was almost nice that the time I had it and when I had the surgery, I was able to play a couple months post-surgery to get some of the kinks out, because when I first came back, there was still a little pain, a little swelling, like I was dealing with a few things just to try to get back in the swing of it. But now I feel great. My body feels 100% ready to go.
Tell us why you have the confidence in this particular group. How is this group different than the last couple years about trying to go all the way?
I just think more experience. I think what we've been through, the first year we were the underdog, we were riding a high, we were just taking adrenaline into the postseason. Didn't really know we were supposed to be there or not, and ended up getting to beat in the World Series. Last year, I think we were a favorite. We were definitely the favorites against Arizona, and we learned what not to do in that spot and how you can't take things for granted. Even if you think you're the better team, you got to go out there and you got to do it, and you got to play every game, take every pitch like it's your last. And I think that's something we can take into this year. No matter who we face in the first round, sure, we'll be the favorite. Most likely in the second round, we could be the favorite. That stuff doesn't matter. You got to go out there and win a baseball game. Every team we play is going to be good. Every team's going to be hot. So we have to do our job, go out there, do the little things well. We got to hold base runners. We got to throw strikes. We got to not swing at balls, put the ball in play. Like the little things we have to do to win postseason series. We can't just rely on the home run ball, and I think that's something that we learned last year.
And Brandon Marsh said that it's basically don't try to do too much. Like last year, the last 2 games, do you think that is a learning experience? Like, okay, there was a lot of pressure. Like, we're going to the World Series if we win 1 game, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of guys did learn from that, the approach at the plate here at home in those pressure situations?
I think failing in that spot last year is something that we can learn from this year and not do the same thing and not try to do too much and just trust ourselves, pass the baton to the hitter behind you and take that type of approach instead of trying to do too much.
I know you said it before, it's the most fun you've ever had playing baseball. This group, tighter than ever, after like 3 runs at this year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can't imagine a team getting along much better than this team does, and that's been for a few years in a row, but I think every year we just get to like each other more and more, get to know each other better and better, and I think it shows on the field that we enjoy playing baseball together and we like to have fun and we like to win, and that's a good recipe.
And you enjoy the Fantasy Football League, right?
I'm not doing too well in it right now. I wish you wouldn't have brought that up. I enjoy it, but I drafted McCaffrey. I have McCaffrey on my team, and he hasn't played yet. So
wow.
I'm 1-3, not a good start.
Wow. Well, Philly knows your pain.
Yeah.
After what happened last week. How cool is that? Are you the commissioner of the team?
No, Stubbsy is.
Okay.
That's too much work for me.
I was going to say.
Pass that on.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Stubbs the perfect commissioner?
We already had a vote on whether we should get rid of him as commissioner or not, and we're only 4 weeks into the season, so that is still yet to be determined.
So what's the problem? Allowing crazy trades?
There was a little bit of he made a waiver wire move, dropped a player after they had already played that week, and picked up a player playing Monday. Kind of sketchy. Not technically it's allowed on the app, but I don't know. It was a little sketchy. We're still going to vote on that to see if he's going to be commissioner or not.
So after the whole Sunday slate of games are done, he's then making.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
come on.
Wow. Stubbsy. That's how he slides this in, right?
That's what I'm saying. And he said because he's commissioner, he can do what he wants, but we're going to have to vote on that.
And he controls the music too, right? So he's got a lot of power.
We'll let him keep doing that. He has gotten power hungry this year. He's the rep for the union and the commissioner. We told him he's getting greedy on us.
Wow. He might be out by the bye week or the halfway through the season, huh?
Yeah.
Well, congrats on a great season, regular season, and best wishes in the playoffs.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, JT.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, celebrity cook Steve Martirano is bringing his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly, where it started. Enjoy Martirano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. So make reservations for Martirano's Prime on Open Table. I've been to the one in Fort Lauderdale. I'm glad it's back in Philly. And welcome back to Takeoff with John Clark, presented by Rivers Casino. And let's bring in our guests from Sirius XM's MLB Network Radio. Let's bring in former general manager and, yes, general manager of the New York Mets, Jim Duquette. Appreciate the time.
How you doing, John? Good to see you again. And I'm excited about postseason baseball is upon us.
I'm telling you, I tell you, there's a part of the Phillies fan base that's a little worried if the Mets come to Philly. So give us your prognosis. Obviously, the hottest teams in baseball in the second half. I saw it, the Padres, Dodgers, and Mets in the National League. Philly's only a 500 team in the second half. So what would be your level of concern for Phillies fans if it's the Mets who come to Philly?
Well, I think with the Phillies, when I look at it, they weren't playing for an awful lot down the stretch. There was nobody that was really pushing them. For a little while, you're like, oh, maybe the Braves, and then they fell off. The Mets were really never a threat at all. And so sometimes, and I've seen this over the last maybe even dozen years or so since I've been in the postseason, covering the postseason for Sirius. Like those teams that have those big leads, it's not a lot to play for. And, they don't have quite the same adrenaline in some of those games day to day than if you were in a pennant race. And that can be good, or it can go against you sometimes too. So there's good and bad in both. But I wouldn't put too much emphasis or worry on how things went in September for the Phillies club, because I really think they're the most well-rounded team in either league, not just the National League, but I think in the American League too.
So Dave Dombrowski, the Phillies president, he said he believes this is their best team and best chance because the team is deeper, the bullpen's deeper and better. They've got 4 starters now, and then the experience of the last 2 years. Are you totally in line with Dave Dombrowski and what he's saying there?
I am. I very rarely disagree with Dave, and I'm not disagreeing with him on this either. I think a couple things. You don't need experience to do well in the postseason, but it really helps. Especially when you're in an environment like Citizens Bank Park, which is a huge difference maker. And we saw it got off track there, Game 6 and Game 7 last year in the NLCS. I hate bringing that up, but it was also a significant advantage for them in 2022, certainly. And I think when they had a few more weaknesses last year, certainly in the bullpen. As we know, the offense went stagnant there late. But I think when you go through those type of things before, it helps you in the future. And I don't feel like there's a team that is, well, outside of San Diego, and I think San Diego is a real threat. We'll see if San Diego is sitting there versus Philly at some point for the LCS. But I think having gone through what they did last year, you learn a little bit along the way, and I don't think they'll have that same. I don't know if it wasn't complacency, but everybody went in a funk at the same time. And I don't view this offensive team like that this year.
And how about the starting pitching? Because I hear everybody's worried about the hot team, but where would you say the Phillies starting pitching ranks with all these teams in the National League?
Well, I think that they're the best. They're the deepest, they're the best of any of the teams that are in it. I don't know if there's a team that really matches up. Maybe the Padres match up close. Watching Michael King there last night, he was fantastic. And Musgrove is, when he's on, he's really good. And, they know that, they don't even need Yu Darvish necessarily. He's, a guy that, has been good over time. Yeah. Dylan Cease is fantastic. He's right now pitching in the third spot. So they have maybe 4 guys that would compete with the Phillies, but I don't think it's at the level that the Phillies have, which they have a true number 1 in Wheeler. They have a true number 2 in Nola. Sanchez has been unbelievable the entire year. And if Ranger Suarez is your 4th starter, that he trumps pretty much any other number 4 starter. And you don't use the 4th starter all that much anyway in the postseason.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the big topic of conversation here is since the Phillies will be starting with the 2 home games in the NLDS, we've seen Christopher Sanchez, his splits, he's been exceptional at home, not so good on the road. So if you're in charge and you had to make the call, would you go with Christopher Sanchez over Ranger or Aaron Nola in the second game? I guess it's basically Christopher Sanchez or Aaron Nola.
Right. I think that's the decision. And, I think when in a 5-game series, what's fascinating to me is when you come back at the second time around, right, those 1 and number 2 starters are whoever's starting there. It's not just about the game 2 starter, but who's pitching in game 5 too, right? And if that's at home also. So you have to kind of take that into consideration. I think in this particular situation, because it lines up that way for you at home, then I would say, for Sanchez, those numbers are so compelling that I would do it in this round. It might change in the LCS depending on the matchup and depending on, where things are. But I do think that if you have a chance to get 2 home starts there, I would feel confident in Sanchez in that situation.
So if we do get Phillies-Mets for the first time ever in the playoffs, which is so fascinating that it hasn't happened, how electric do you think this series would be?
Well, I think the Phillies fans better buy up the tickets as quickly as they can, because there'll be a lot of Mets fans that want to get into Citizens Bank and make a presence known. And I think the opposite is true too. The Mets fans better buy up a lot of seats at Citi Field, because there's no question the Philly fans would want to come. And I think that it's stunning to me that they've never faced each other, but it's usually they're getting in at the expense of the other, right? So we've seen that a lot. And but I think that this would be one of those must-watch postseason games. It'd be great for the sport, and I'm about the global aspect of it. We need more attention on the sport that way. And I think it wouldn't just be up and down the I-95 corridor. That would be the interest level. So yeah, I think I'm hoping that will happen. And if that's the case, then I'm going to see you this weekend.
We would love to host you in Philly. Now, if you want to wear a Mets hat or something,
I know better. I know better. I can't do that.
Yeah. It's funny, Jim, about baseball because, the Phillies just came out of the gate so strong, best record by far for a while. And like you said, maybe you pump the brakes a tiny bit or like, okay, what is it we have to play for? But then you see these teams over the last 5-6 years, the hot teams coming into baseball, the postseason. The Phillies were that team 2 years ago. And I think the worry is that the Mets could be that team. What is your experience when you see the team with the great record, the great regular season that has a bye and gets some time off, 5 days versus the hot team that just continues to roll?
So I would be more concerned about that if I was a Phillies fan, that time off, than I would be how they played in September. That's been, there's one team that's overcome that layoff during this new format. And we're only in year, 3 of that new format with this, the number 1 and 2 seeds getting buys. Houston Astros did it, and they ended up going on and winning the World Series there. It can be done. There is an awful lot of prep. And, most of the players that I've talked to when they've had the time off, they were like, what happens is this period of time where you're used to playing every day, you don't have that. And it's hard to flip the switch right away and get into that first game of the postseason. That's where it really shows up. I feel like in the timing of the hitters in game 1, maybe the first 2 at bats or something. If it happens at all. Houston was able to overcome it that year. Everyone else doesn't really quite have the answer yet. And I think the teams are still trying to search for what's the best way to stay active, during this off time. We'll see if the Phillies have that there, but I still feel confident in this overall group because they have depth in their offense.
And it's really kind of fascinating with Zack Wheeler, where he really, and pitchers and especially baseball players, they want to stay on schedule, but Zack, he hasn't done as well in his career when pitching on that longer rest. He has pitched fantastic and arguably the Cy Young Award winner this year. How do you think he deals with that extra time off, the extra layoff heading into his start Saturday?
For some guys, and Zack maybe, and I've seen it with others, that there's the adrenaline that you have in game 1 or after a layoff where you have the stuff is a little bit more crisp. There's a little bit more movement than you're used to. And, you have a harder time kind of commanding in the zone early on. The thing that I love about Wheeler, though, that he has grown since he was a Met, and really it's happened on the Phillies watch. It's, he has the great command and control of his stuff, and it has control and command of his emotion. So I think that, each of the really good pitchers in the league, they learn off of their prior experiences. And I think he's one of those guys that I don't worry about. There are others, throughout the league, and there may be another, that I would worry about in the maybe the Phillies rotation if it was true. But Wheeler is one guy that I don't really worry too much about. I feel like he'll make the adjustment in game.
And it's going to be extra spicy if it does happen, Zack, facing his former team, the Mets, since they really kind of felt like they didn't need to give him the offer maybe that he was looking for out there on the market.
When you have a little extra motivation, something to pitch for, and against a former team, a lot of times that doesn't go well for the former team, and I think that's another, I think, avenue that we know we've seen it over time, but we know with Wheeler. So Wheeler, when he went into Atlanta, when he was a Met, and pitching against the Braves, he's always done well in Atlanta, right? Yeah. He's from that area. It's another level that he's shown. And I think pitching against the Mets, he would love to shove against the Mets, even though a lot of the guys that he played with aren't there anymore. It's still the uniform, right? It's still the team, still the organization that didn't make him that offer. And, credit to the Phillies for doing that, for believing in him and buying into it. That first contract that he signed with the Phillies is a bargain when you kind of go back and look at it over time.
Is it one of the best contracts you've ever seen, actually?
I mean, I think that the argument is there to say yes. I can't think of many others that are in that same boat, off the top of my head. And, I think that, and I think he got robbed of winning the Cy Young the year that Corbin Burns was awarded the Cy Young. If I had a vote, I would have voted for Wheeler that year because his innings pitched over Burns was, I think it was 35 or 40 more. It was a significant number of innings, and that matters. Over the course of 162 games, we don't know if Burns had pitched every 5th day, what those numbers would have looked like. He might have crashed and burned. Who knows? So I thought that the voters undersold Wheeler in that year for the Cy Young. So he should have at least one under his belt, probably another one. But if he's still runner-up and you get a World Series ring out of it, I don't think he'll really care.
So, of course, most Phillies people say Zack Wheeler should be the Cy Young this year, and most Braves people, they say Chris Sale. So if you could be our arbitrator here, who do you think should win the Cy Young in the National League?
I'll tell you what, this won't be a popular take with the Philly fans, but you have to look at, there's a pitcher's triple crown, right? There's wins, there's strikeouts, and there's ERA. And Chris Sale led the National League in all three of those categories. And I think, he hasn't won it. Zack hasn't won it. So I think it's a fascinating debate, a fascinating vote. But I know a lot of the voters in what they tend to lean towards, and they tend to lean towards some of those number ones, some of those never been done before or rarely been done before. That's why I think Ohtani's going to get the MVP award, because he did things that we haven't ever seen in the sport. And I think with Sale, it's very rare that you lead all three of those categories. And so I think that there's a number of voters that would go that way.
Yeah, and look, that's a very compelling thing. I would say, okay, Zack Wheeler led baseball in WHIP.
Right.
And then you look, he was just on fire and pitching tremendously down the stretch. And Chris did not make his last start. He
Right.
couldn't make his last start with back spasms. And Zack, he has the most quality starts in baseball. So I think the consistency has been there. And the other thing, too, is if you look at Zack against the best teams in the National League, he pitched better than Chris. So there's a little compelling argument from Philly.
Yeah, well, and I like that, as a sales pitch for sure. And I do think that, it's important to kind of get some of that information out there. They've already voted, right? I believe they vote right at the end of the season, if I'm not mistaken, and they announce it later. So, they've taken into consideration that the regular season. But I do think that there is an argument, and, they like to use, the writers like to use wins above replacement. I'm not sure where they stack up, those two, back to back, but they're pretty darn close there. And a lot of times the voters don't really count wins nearly as much, because that's more of a product of your team, and there's a little bit of luck involved there too. So, even though he led the league in wins, there's some that would not really give him as much credit there. So, I think it's a lot closer maybe than people would think. But again, I've seen this, unfortunately. The writers, they don't really have necessarily one or two or three criteria that they'll use to vote on, but they tend to lean towards those ones that, if you lead the league in certain things, they tend to go that direction.
Yeah, we're hoping that Zack Wheeler gets one, because he's been right there for a couple of years. So if you're giving me your picks for who do you think is going to wind up in the NLCS?
Well, I've been saying this all along. I think that Philadelphia and San Diego are the two teams, a rematch from a couple years ago. I think they're both of them are the most complete teams. I think the Dodgers are a flawed team. I know the Mets are a flawed team. They are hot. Certainly, but I just don't think they have the starting pitching. I think they have some weaknesses in the bullpen. And so there's some concerns there. The Padres are about as deep as the Phillies in a lot of different areas. Their bullpen is 7 deep, and they're all 98 to 100 plus miles an hour guys, which again doesn't mean, as dominating as that can be, they're still hittable. It's just, you have more margin of error when you throw that hard, and they've got like 3 lefties and 3 righties that all throw hard like that. So they're going to be a real force against the Dodgers, and I think it's going to end up being a rematch from a couple of years for those two teams.
Oh, that would be fun. Maybe a little more bedlam at the bank with Bryce Harper.
Let's
People
hope.
would love to see that. So what's your World Series pick?
So I think in that scenario, it's a tough one. I love Philly. I would pick Philly in that scenario. And I also think in American League, I think there's a clear distinction between the Yankees and everybody else. So we could see, what was that, 2011?
Yeah, 2009.
No, 2009 rather. Sorry,
yeah.
2009, which I was there for that too. And that rematch for sure, I could see that happening pretty easily. I think the Yankees, here's the thing. I think the Orioles are going to get bounced. So now if you're looking at, Kansas City, you're looking at Cleveland, Houston's been in trouble here. If it's the Yankees and 3 American League Central teams, I cannot imagine that the Yankees can't get by those teams and get themselves into the World Series. So I feel like there's a clearer pathway maybe for the Yankees in the American League side, but I do think it would be Philly and New York.
Well, I'll tell you, that would be an amazing storyline, because I was up there as well. And after the game, when the Phillies lost to the Yankees, of course, John Middleton, the Phillies owner, well, part owner then, he went over to Ryan Howard and said, "Get me my effing trophy back." So this would be the perfect way to do it against the Yankees.
You know what? It really would. And I think that's pretty compelling, right? When you look at that, when you look at the fact that they got the NL East trophy back, right? It's been a while since they had gotten the NL East trophy. I think John might have made a similar comment, give me my damn trophy back, which, he can make that same demand and look look like he's been one of those predictive guys that like he was for the NL East. But I do think that there's a compelling reason or compelling answer there for the Phillies to be able to pull that off. And again, both ballparks, by the way, are difference makers. But again, I've been in the new Yankee Stadium. It's not like the bank. Like there's no other place like it that can match it. So I think that while it doesn't always work, the home field advantage in baseball, it is a huge advantage for the Phillies.
It is pretty wild what it has become, Red October. And you, of course, on Sirius XM's MLB Network Radio, you guys are actually giving away to your subscribers a chance to win a pair of tickets to every postseason game. That's pretty cool. So you can go to x.com/MLB Network Radio for the rules and info. So tickets to every game, hopefully a couple maybe to the Phillies, right? Every game. So even the Phillies NLDS and NLCS games. Yeah,
we were giving out one for every game of the wild card. We're going to do it again for the DS and for the LCS and the World Series too. You got to be in. You have to make your own transportation, so it helps if you're there in Philly. We're not paying for that, but we get free tickets. That's it's pretty compelling. All you got to do is answer a trivia question, and it's usually Phillies related if it's a home game. So it's like a lab.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jim Duquette, I have one final question for you. Being a former general manager and constructing a team, Dave Dombrowski, the job he has done. Now, look, Matt Klentak, if you go look some of these moves, he was the one who brought in JT Realmuto in the trade. He signed Zack Wheeler, Bryce Harper, all that. Mm-hmm. But Dave Dombrowski, all of the moves that he's made, transforming the bullpen and other things, what do you think of the job he's done here in Philly?
Well, listen, Dave is going to be a Hall of Famer when he decides to retire. He already has, 2 World Series rings. We saw in Miami, there was the Florida Marlins at the time, Boston Red Sox. He's been to the World Series several other times, obviously as a Philly, as a Tigers executive. So, there's only one thing left is to get a World Series ring for a third team. That would be a fitting way for him to retire, is to do it, which is likely Philly. Whenever he decides to retire, Philly's his team. I got to imagine. So, in terms of understanding the personnel, understanding how to build teams, showing patience, which is a hard thing to do sometimes as a general manager when you have a fan base that's so rabid, they want you to make moves all the time. But he's shown a lot of patience, but he's also made the moves that were necessary to improve the team. So, I think all the way around. He's been and has, I feel like over the last 12 years, the top or one of the top executives in the sport. And I don't think no one can even argue that. I think if you're an executive of another team, just because of his success for how long he's done it.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. I think I have this right, that when the Phillies went to the World Series, he's the first ever in baseball to lead 4 different teams to a World Series appearance. And I think in all of pro sports, I think he's right there. Maybe there's one other, but I think he might be the only one, general manager, 4 different teams to the promised land.
Yeah. Well, I think I look at the general managers that are in the Hall of Fame now, right? Pat Gillick, of course, Philly fans are very familiar with Pat, and his getting to the World Series and winning World Series in Philly and then Toronto. And then John Schuerholz, who, had all those great years in Atlanta, but only had one World Series, I think, during that stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dave's, resume is equal to or better than those two. And so it's a matter of time. He just has to decide if he wants to retire. I understand why he wants to keep doing it. He's had so much success. It's a lot more fun when you're having success like this. But at some point, if he decides to call it a day, it'll take about 5 years, and then the voters will vote him in.
Yeah, and I think when you have an owner, when you pick up the phone and say, "How about we add Nick Castellanos?" I know we added all these other guys, but like John Middleton goes for it every year.
Yeah. Well, John Middleton is one of those guys that maybe doesn't get mentioned enough. But the support that he has had financially, the trust that he has, not only in Rob Thompson, but also Dave Dombrowski. And I remember we interviewed John last year on a pregame show there for Sirius. And John came on and he said, we trust Dave so much that if he comes to me with a compelling argument to spend money, I'll do it. And John is willing to invest his own money to win, where other owners across the sport are more concerned with making money or not going over the luxury tax. That's never been an issue for John. He's in fairness, the Phillies ownership's been pretty darn good, before John took over as the majority owner too. But, I think now that he is there, he's taken it to another level.
And you know what? What's great is he's from Philly. He's a fan first. He throws baseballs to the fans before games, and that is so cool to see, the connection.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that part. Yeah, he's very generous in that area too, which you have to appreciate. He understands, where he and where the Phillies are, in the scheme of things there, in where they fit with the fan base.
Well, cool. Jim Duquette, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we look forward to hearing you all playoffs on Sirius XM's MLB Network radio coverage. So we will see you in Philly.
Yes, you will.
So, and then the NLCS.
Maybe this weekend, and definitely LCS. If you'll see me for that too. By the way, former Philly Kevin Franzen will probably be with me too. So
absolutely,
we'll come eat a cheesesteak with you.
You got it. And you may need to comfort Kevin right now with Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers.
Yes.
Yes. Bad spot for Kevin.
It's bad. He's hurting right now, but you know what? He's going to have to get over it. We don't have sympathy for him. I know you don't either.
No. He's a good dude. We appreciate your time, Jim.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, mom, so flagrant.